This video is about some basic concepts in science. It is part of my series Introduction to Psychology. I will begin by explaining the difference between basic and applied research. Next, I will hopefully clarify the differences between experimental and non-experimental types of study. Finally, I will explain what is meant by qualitative and quantitative research. My name is Jouni Vilkka, and this is my channel, TFF Teacher from Finland. Don't forget to subscribe and click the thumbs up button. One way to categorize different studies is to use the distinction between basic research and applied research. Basic research is the core of science, just trying to understand something, to explain a phenomenon, to create new knowledge. This often means formulating a new theory that explains a set of known facts. In psychology, it could be about external influences to human interaction, for example. Applied research is using an available theory, or several, to solve a specific problem or to achieve some specific goal. In psychology, it could have to do with finding a way to alleviate social anxiety or to develop a method to empower members of a minority group or other similar tangible goal. The difference between applied and basic research is that basic research does not have a goal other than seeking the truth. So there is no expected use for the knowledge created, no reward in sight, except the truth itself. That is why I think it is the core of science and shows that the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake is an important and intrinsic value for science. Applied research is important as well, especially for improving the quality of life for everyone benefiting from it, but the value of such research is instrumental. Such research would not be conducted without the expectation of reward extrinsic to the research itself. Any non-experimental study differs from an experimental study in the crucial way that only the latter can discover causal connections between things, one thing causing another. An experiment is required to establish a causal connection between certain variables. One is called a dependent variable because its value is assumed to depend on the value of the other variable. The other is simply called the independent variable. It is the one the researcher manipulates somehow. It can be as simple as placing a gun on a table in plain view of a person being interviewed. This can then be used to show differences between answers given by the interviewees when a gun was present and when it wasn't present. The data collected in an experimental study has to be statistically analyzed because the effects caused by the changed variable are usually changes of probability, especially in the context of human behavior, which is understandably rather complicated. Experimental research typically has to be done in a lab, because to show a causal connection between two specific variables, it is necessary to isolate them and make sure there are no unintended, confounding variables to mess up the experiment. Besides being difficult to do in practice, especially with test subjects as complicated as humans, it is also questionable whether the findings can be generalized to real-world situations. Some things just cannot be studied in a lab, and instead field research using naturalistic observations, with the researcher influencing the subjects as little as possible in a natural environment, are required. That is obviously a type of non-experimental study, and sometimes it is needed because a laboratory just cannot be used. An unnatural environment can lead to completely mistaken conclusions, as happened with the classic wolf study about alpha wolves and other nonsense. The wolves were studied in captivity, causing them to act in an unusual manner. The faulty conclusions of that study have been far-reaching, as can be seen in how some people still call themselves alphas, for example. Studying wolves in their natural habitat is necessary for understanding how wolves normally behave. Field research can seek to answer questions like how something happens in ordinary circumstances. The answers may, of course, be inaccurate, subjective, and there may be disturbance of some kind involved, influencing what happens and how it is interpreted by the researcher. Still, it can be the only way to approach the topic, and it can also be fairly easy to do, at least compared to a lab experiment. It is possible to study pretty much any ordinary human activity using just observation, although it may be dangerous if one wants to study how criminals behave, for example. A case study is focused on just one case, as the name implies. It is the one type of study that cannot utilize statistical analysis because it is only looking at a unique case. It can be, for example, a phenomenon, an individual, or an event. It can be done either in a lab or in a natural environment, or it can be basically historical research about a case. It can be about a case that the researcher hopes will reveal something important about people in general, worthy of more research, an exploratory research. It can seek potential explanations, such as causes for certain behavior, explanatory research. Or it can merely describe something like an unusual population, descriptive research. A descriptive study, such as a survey, as the name implies, merely describes the subject, such as a population, to give an idea of its features. For example, one might be interested in finding out what kinds of people watch educational YouTube videos. Perhaps they would seem to have something in common. This type of study obviously requires the use of statistics to be of any use. Usually, the goal of a descriptive study is to be generalizable to the whole population of a country, say. It can be a small population as well, such as members of the same class in a school, but the usefulness of such information will be limited, whereas information about the whole country's population might be very useful in many ways. It is not necessary to poll all the members of the population, as long as information can be collected from a representative sample. That means a sample that shares the same statistical variations as the whole population it is meant to be a sample of. For example, roughly the same percentage of each gender, age group, educational group, and so on. Descriptive studies don't have to explain anything, as they can simply describe a population, or distributions of opinions within a selected group, or something like that. It is generally supposed to be generalizable to the larger population. It is just cheaper and easier to poll a smallish number of people instead of the whole population. Information thus gathered can be useful, increasing our understanding of a phenomenon or a group of people, for example, even if it does not point to connections like potential causes between things. Such a purely descriptive study can be a starting point for more research that could point to those connections. In that case, we could call it an exploratory study. The whole point of such research would be to get a better idea of an issue, and it could even turn out that the issue doesn't really even exist. It is a preliminary research that is not expected to be generalizable to a larger population. It may also not be a statistical study, but instead based on qualitative methods, which I will discuss shortly. A type of study very similar to a descriptive study is correlational research. It can show that some things, variables, may seem to be connected to each other, but not that they are causally connected. The connection between variables is called a correlation. A positive correlation between two variables means that as one variable goes up, so does the other. A negative correlation means that as one variable goes up, the other goes down. For example, outdoor temperature and the demand for cold drinks are probably positively correlated. Here's another example. During a course on statistics, I did a small study about car prices. I found that the price of cars positively correlates with the size of their engines and negatively correlates with their age. That is, new cars and cars with big engines tend to be more expensive than old cars or cars with small engines. Not highly surprising. You might be tempted to say that, in fact, those things cause the prices of cars, and you might be right. I just want to emphasize that this type of research does not prove it. Correlation is not the same as causation. Correlational studies can show that there is no causal connection between two variables, because if there were, there would also be a correlation between them. Discovering a lack of correlation would thus show that there is no causal link between them. But if there is a correlation, it only means that the variables seem to be connected somehow, not that one causes the other. There may be a third factor causing both, for example. There are lots of spurious correlations that may be funny, such as the correlation between frozen yogurt consumption and crime rate. This can be, and probably is, purely coincidental. One of the most important categorizations of research is based on the type of data it collects. Quantitative research is the easier one to understand as it collects data about quantities, measured in numbers. For example, height, weight, speed, or replies to questions on a form by choosing a value to represent how much the subject agrees with the statement. Sometimes the concepts used in a study cannot be measured directly and so have to be operationalized so that a useful number can be found. For example, a patient may be asked to give a number between 0 and 10 to describe the amount of pain they feel. That alone is useless, but if they are asked to do the same repeatedly over the duration of the treatment they are receiving, these subjective values can be useful in representing the patient's subjective experience of pain. And importantly, any changes in that experience. The numerical data of quantitative research makes statistical analysis possible. Qualitative research does not produce such numerical data because it seeks to understand the unique qualities of the subject. It can analyze interviews, natural discussions, written materials, and so on. It typically uses discourse analysis as the method to get to the way meaning is produced or changed and how power is used. It is possible to also combine both approaches to gain a better understanding of the issue. The narrated experiences of people can enable a deeper and more nuanced understanding than mere statistics. Sometimes preliminary or exploratory research using qualitative methods, such as interviews, may be necessary preparation for a quantitative study because the researchers have to first come to an understanding of the sort of phenomenon they are trying to study and need to conceptualize and operationalize them so that they can be used in surveys or even experiments. This was all I wanted to say about the types of psychological research. The next video will be about collecting and analyzing data. I hope to see you there. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.